Um, Good to be here. Although I have to confess I've been a little contemplative today from this ride from Connecticut to Boston, because it's the same ride I took 42 years ago when I learned that Prabhupada left the planet, and tomorrow is his disappearance day. So I thought maybe I would speak a little bit about Prabhupada, since it's his disappearance day tomorrow. And I was in Hartford on November 14th, 1977. And there's a particular place, it's on the Interstate 84, just before you get to the Massachusetts Turnpike, right at the border of Massachusetts. There's, I think it's Holland, Mass, and Union, Connecticut. There's right at the... I happened to... I was driving to Boston from Hartford with a few devotees in the car and another van of devotees. We were coming to Boston for, I can't remember what it was, some event we were coming. And I was going to be late. And I pulled over on this exit just before entering Massachusetts. There was a payphone there. I think right now it's a place where they sell caravans. What do they call them in English? They call them caravans in Europe. I forget what they call them in America. RV, recreational vehicles. But it was a garage back then where they had a payphone. And I had to call to say I was going to be a little late. So when I pulled over, I got out and called on the payphone to the devotee who was the president here at the time. He broke the news to me that Prabhupada had left. And at that particular time, many of us, all of us practically, were thinking that Prabhupada was going to stay, because he kind of indicated that Krishna gave him the choice to leave or not leave. And because all the devotees were so much trying to convince him to stay, Prabhupada had, last we heard, Prabhupada had said, "Okay, I'll stay." That's the last we heard. And anyways, it was a shock to me. I was just reading one quote today. Prabhupada was saying in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It says that in a purport, it says figuratively, queen is supposed to be the disciple of the king. Thus, when the mortal body of the spiritual master expires, his disciples should cry exactly as the queen cries when the king leaves his body. However, the disciple and the spiritual master are never separated, because the spiritual master always keeps company with the disciple as long as the disciple follows strictly the instructions of the spiritual master. This is called the association of Vani, words. Physical presence is called Vapu. As long as the spiritual master is physically present, disciples should serve the physical body of the spiritual master. But when the spiritual master is no longer physically existing, disciples should serve the instructions of the spiritual master. Many of us, of course, were thrown into that. Where were you, Mukta? November 14th, 1977.
Granny took us up to the mountains.
Yeah, I called the granny. That's how I found out. I was on Interstate 84, huh? I was on the road. Yeah. Prabhupada had actually wanted his disciples to come to Vrindavan. And he wanted as many as possible to come, of course. We weren't told that. And I was asked, Agrani, who was the president at the time, he went to Vrindavan just a month before. And he asked me to stay here and take charge of the temple. So I was staying here and he was in Vrindavan. But then he came back a little bit before because we were all thinking that Prabhupada was going to stay for a while when he said, okay, I'll stay. And then I was in Connecticut and I learned when I made that phone call and I cried. I cried like, you ask any devotee, any disciple of Srila Prabhupada, where were you when you found out that Prabhupada departed? Everybody knows exactly where they were. It's like a movie, what, The Day the Earth Stood Still? Way back in the 60s, there's a movie called The Day the Earth Stood Still. For us, that's how it was like. And it just so happened that I was in charge of in 1977, we had a preaching center in Hartford, Connecticut, in East Hartford, on Silver Lane. And I was in charge of all the new devotees, all the uninitiated devotees. And they were all, I was training them up on book distribution. And nobody knew that Prabhupada left, and they were all uninitiated, and I had to tell them, because they were all, you can imagine, everybody was aspiring to be Prabhupada's disciple, and they were all thinking that we're going to get initiated by Prabhupada someday, and then having to tell them Prabhupada left, that fell on me. It's quite a it was quite a shocking. But I don't want to sound too morbid, because actually Prabhupada in one lecture on the disappearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he was giving a lecture to his disciples, he was explaining how appearance and disappearance for Vaishnava are both the same. And he was emphasizing the point that in fact, I think I have it here. Yeah, this is a lecture. This is a different lecture. He says that as Lord Krishna's appearance and disappearance are all spiritual, transcendental, they are not ordinary things. Similarly, Lord Krishna's devotee, his representative, who is sent to this material world for preaching the glories of Lord Krishna, their appearance and disappearance is also like Krishna's. Therefore, according to Vaishnava principles, the appearance and disappearance of Vaishnava is considered all auspicious. Therefore, we hold festivals. It took me years to figure out how I was going to hold festivals and take part in festivals. But Prabhupada said it, so I had to learn how to follow his instructions, hold festivals. So he says, therefore we hold festivals, just like yesterday we had the disappearance day of His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada. So we offer all respects and observe the festival. Avya Bhav, Tiro Bhav. And although the Vedas describe the Lord's appearance and disappearance, there is actually no end to his pastimes. Actually, the living entity has no birth or death. What to speak of Krishna or his devotee? Krishna is the chief living entity of all living entities. So, Prabhupada said that appearance, disappearance, they're both the same. Because for the Vaishnava, who especially one who comes to this world to serve Lord Krishna's purposes, he comes and he says, gives the example just like the sun. The sun appears before our vision, and then the sun disappears in the west, appears in the east. In the same way, the eternal living entity, the spirit soul, especially the Vaishnava, who descends to serve Krishna's mission, to preach the glories of Lord Krishna and to awaken the fallen conditioned souls into their eternal nature with Krishna. He also comes to this world, and when he leaves this world, he returns. And therefore, Prabhupada says that although when the Vaishnava leaves, we may feel lamentation for the loss of the Vaishnava. And there are many prayers. Just as the song of Narottam Das Thakur, and he describes, it's a song for departed Vaishnavas. That song, Narottam Das Thakur, reveals his inner mood of lamentation, spiritual lamentation, feeling great separation for the associates of the Lord, and he describes how these associates of the Lord, they've left this world, and he's still in this world, and remaining in this world, and breaking his head against the stone he uses in lamentation of their departure. So although we may lament the departure when a Vaishnava leaves, because we lose his physical association, Prabhupada says that for a disciple, there is always association. Two forms is physical, vapu. The disciple continues to associate with the spiritual master through vani, which is non-different. Therefore, we had to learn how to associate through vani. And Prabhupada explains also that although we may lament when a Vaishnava leaves because we lose his physical association, for the Vaishnava there's no cause of lamentation. There's nothing to lament for the Vaishnava who leaves, because he reasons ill who say that Vaishnavas die when thou art living still and sound. Vaishnavas die to live, and in living try to spread the holy name around. So Vaishnavas don't die. Vaishnavas continue to render service to the Lord, and for those who are in pure Krishna consciousness, we understand that they continue to serve the Lord. Why should we lament for the Vaishnava who departs? Therefore we celebrate. We have festivals. Tomorrow should be a festival. I don't know if there is a festival, but actually, I was asked, I don't want to make it sound like there was an attempt to be a festival. I was asked if I could be here tomorrow, but I said either tonight or tomorrow, one or the other, because I had other things to do, and I was told, better tonight. So I said, okay. But festival is celebrating the disappearance, Tirobhav Mahotsava, that when the Vaishnava leaves our vision, he may leave our vision just as the sun leaves our vision when it sets in the west, but the Vaishnava is eternally serving the Lord. So that was in 1977, November 14th. I oftentimes remember, and I cite this oftentimes, that once there was a conversation with Srila Prabhupada in the early 1970s, and Prabhupada was telling how that every 11 years something auspicious in his life happened. And he was saying how that in 1922 is the year that he first met his spiritual master in Ultadanga Road. That is given, details of that are given in the Prabhupada Lilamrita. Prabhupada was, at that time, he was requested by his friend Niranjana to go see a saintly person, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Prabhupada was explaining in one lecture that Niranjana had said to him that if you go and if you hear from this great saintly person, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, because Prabhupada said at that time, he said he was very influential. In 1922, he was, 26 years old. He said amongst his friends he was a leader, and whatever he did, others would follow. So his friend Niranjanath tried to get him to go see Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, because he was thinking that if Abai goes to see Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, then many others will come. They'll follow his example. And when you know that when Prabhupada arrived at Ultadanga Road, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was sitting on the rooftop. He was speaking to his disciples, and he and Narendra, his friend Narendranath, from a distance, they prostrated themselves in obeisance to the saintly person they saw. And no sooner did they rise than Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur took note of them and said to them right there on the spot, first meeting, "You look like intelligent men. Why don't you take Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message to the West?" And Prabhupada received his instruction from his spiritual master from his first meeting in 1922. And of course, Prabhupada describes in many of his talks how he was a little resistant to the idea. And he said that first we have to, because he was part of Gandhi's movement, how can we actually take up this mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? There's a more important mission that we have to engage in, and that India has to get free from the influence of British rule. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur at that time gave a very strong argument and convinced Srila Prabhupada that whether this British rule or another rule, these things will come and go. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission is urgent and it must be spread now. And therefore, he gave various arguments to convince Srila Prabhupada that much more important than a free India is freedom of all living entities from the repetition of birth, death, disease, and old age. And Prabhupada understood at that very first meeting that he had met a great saintly person. And at that point, he accepted Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in his heart as his spiritual master. And Prabhupada explains, he said actually real initiation takes place in the heart. That when the disciple hears through the words of a great saintly person, and Krishna manifests through the words of that saintly person, and he said this is actual connection with the spiritual master. Although formally Srila Prabhupada didn't take initiation until 1933. So it was 1922, his first meeting, in 1933, 11 years, which Prabhupada said was the next very auspicious point in his life, when in 1933 he took initiation for Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And as we know that Srila Prabhupada was a householder, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had started his Gaudiya mission, was opening various temples in different places. Prabhupada was, although he had taken initiation, he was living outside, he was earning his livelihood, and various times and places he would meet up with members of the Gaudiya Math, and he would assist them in various ways, especially Bihar Sridhar Maharaj, who was his godbrother. And in fact, I think it was in Bombay, I can't remember what year it was, when Prabhupada went to the Gaudiya Math, the Math that had been established there, and then he was visiting, and then I think it was Bhakti Maharaj who had told Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bhai Babu, why don't we make him the temple president of a temple? And Prabhupada's response was, no, let him stay outside. He said, in due course of time, he'll do something very important. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur knew way ahead of time. In fact, I was reading something very interesting today. It's one of my favorite stories from a book was written by a god sister of mine. Hare Krishna. Gopa Vrindapal's wife. What's Mula Prakriti? Yes, Mula Prakriti. And she had gathered different stories from different Vaishnavas who had known Prabhupada. And one of my favorite stories from that book that she put, Srila Prabhupada, a friend of all, I think that was the name of the book. It was a story by it was Nayanananda Das Babaji. I had met him. He was Prabhupada's godbrother, and he was a pujari for many years in Navadvip of a deity that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur asked him to worship. And he lived out his whole life just serving those deities till the end of his life. When I had gone and visited him, I think it was in the 80s, I went with a group of devotees, and he was worshipping those deities. But he was he's telling a story, and it was recorded. And he was saying the last year that our Gurudev organized and performed Gauramanda Parikram, Mandala Parikram, thousands and thousands of pilgrims assembled at our Champahati Mandir. That's where he was the pujari, at Champahati Mandir. Says there was a whole village of tents in all directions. On the afternoon of the last day, one of our godbrothers had just arrived in Navadvip, having returned from London by boat. He had gone to preach, but had returned without meeting with full success. In the evening, while Guru Maharaj, we're speaking about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in the evening while Guru Maharaj was giving pravachan, he explained that it was his earnest desire that the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu should be spread in the Western countries. He told how it was the vision of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur that this would happen. And it was also the last request of his mother, Srimati Bhagavati Devi, to him before she left this world. Consequently, he had been willing to take the lifeblood of the Gaudiya Math in funds to send devotees there to preach. But so far, these attempts had been largely unsuccessful. At this moment in his talk, I noticed that something very mysterious was happening. Guru Maharaj was looking out at the large crowd of devotees, especially in the front, where all the sannyasis and brahmacharis in red cloth were. Then he turned his head and looked over to his left side, where I was standing. He was looking intently at someone and became silent for a long moment. I happened to look behind me, so he was looking his way, but he saw that he was looking his way, but he wasn't looking at him, and he was trying to figure out, who's he looking at? So he turned around. He said, I happened to look behind me, and I clearly saw that the person with whom he was making eye contact was Abhay Charanaravinda Prabhu. I thought that they were looking at each other in a special way. Then Guru Maharaj again addressed the audience in front of him and said, but I have a prediction. However long in the future it may be, I predict that one of my disciples will cross the ocean, and that devotee will bring back the whole world. I remember this incident, and Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj truly made it come to pass exactly in this way. End of story. So, Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in 1933, he initiated him. Prabhupada stayed outside, and even when there was a request for Prabhupada, some of his godbrothers to get more involved, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, no, let him stay. In due course of time, he will do everything. So, that was in, I believe, in the early 1940s. But now, 1933, the next year, 11 years, was 1944. 1944 was when Srila Prabhupada began Bhakti Godhead magazine. And although Bhakti Godhead is not as popular today as it was back when I joined. Back when I joined, practically speaking, Bhakti Godhead was one of the only things we had for distribution. We used to go out, not here, North Beacon Street, that we used to go out every day, and we'd all take a case of Bhakti Godhead magazines with us, and for 25 cents each, we tried to distribute Bhakti Godhead magazines. Sometimes we may distribute 10, 15, 20, but we'd take a case. I think a case had 100, 150 in them. And in those days, we had no vehicles. So we were given a case of Bhakti Godhead magazines, and we're told that if you want to go someplace, you have to sell some Bhakti Godhead magazines to get enough money for the subway to go and distribute Bhakti Godhead magazines. But although that may have seemed difficult, for Srila Prabhupada was going in regularly to Delhi to print Bhakti Godhead magazines. And not only would he write all the articles, and not only would he type out all the articles, but he would go into Delhi to try to get the paper to print the Bhakti Godhead magazines. And there were times when Prabhupada couldn't keep up with his distribution because he was the only distributor. And he couldn't keep up with the distribution, and the printer would say, Abai Babu, how long can I go on printing? I need to be paid at some point. And Prabhupada would beg him, please, soon I'll make all payments for it. And he would convince the printer to print the next edition of Bhakti Godhead magazine. And then Prabhupada used to go on bicycle, and he would go to the tea stalls, and he'd go different places and meet people and stop, and he was the only distributor of Bhakti Godhead magazine. So, of course, we would take shelter in stories of had a difficult time. Maybe they go out and get subway fare, but Prabhupada would go out by bicycle. In fact, there's one story, and Prabhupada, the friend to all, I'm not going to have enough time to tell all these things that I wanted to talk about. It's going to be 7 o'clock in 5 minutes. But anyways, but there was one story when one person was telling that he would always know when Prabhupada was coming with his Bhakti Godhead magazines. But because Prabhupada was riding a bicycle that was broken, and whenever he would pedal the bicycle, the chain would hit the side, and you could hear. So whenever he heard of someone coming in a bicycle, he knew it was a Bhai Babu coming with a Back to Godhead magazine to come and to try to convince him to purchase a Back to Godhead magazine. So this is how Prabhupada was distributing on bicycle Back to Godhead magazines. He started Back to Godhead in 1944.
Hare Krishna. So the lecture was like, we shouldn't stop that in meanwhile, but with the time constraint, I will be sharing the introduction of Maharaj. I will share the lectures link in the group. So about the introduction of His Holiness Niranjana Swami Maharaj. Maharaj was born on December 10th, 1952 in Massachusetts, United States. And he was raised in a family with strong moral and spiritual values. From a very young age, he was deeply contemplative and searching for life's ultimate purpose. So, about the spiritual awakening that happened in early 70s, especially in 1972. So, in 1972, Maharaj discovered a copy of Bhagavad Gita as it is in a bookstore in Washington, D.C. Reading Srila Prabhupada's translation and purpose became a life-changing revelation. And thus, he finally began exploring Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy and reading Srila Prabhupada's other works. So, Maharaj was deeply touched by Srila Prabhupada's books and the chanting of the Holy Name when he later got connected to the temples. And he very soon joined the movement and took up the devotional service wholeheartedly. And in the following year of 1974, he was initiated by Srila Prabhupada. And he was then, he was very sincere, humble, and had a very strong desire to serve Srila Prabhupada's mission. So, after getting the book, he returned to Massachusetts and began to regularly visit the ISKCON local temple and continued working as a house builder while cultivating bhakti and associating with the devotees. And mid 1973, moved into the temple, and in 74, he got initiation from Srila Prabhupada. And later, soon he also got the Brahmin initiation, and thus he dedicated himself to full-time devotional service, distributing books and preaching Krishna consciousness. Just a second. I think so my screen is not visible. Sharing once again.
Yeah, screen was moving.
Yes,
Yeah,
Maharaj.
now it's okay.
So as I said that in his early life, he got Bhagavad Gita in 1972, and then later on, he began to visit ISKCON Boston from 1972 to 74, and in mid of 1973, he moved to the temple, and by 1974 he got initiated by Srila Prabhupada in Boston, and soon he got Brahman initiation, and thus he dedicated his whole life in service. So from 1986 he got the sannyas initiation. So between the years 1980s to 1990s, Maharaj served in various aspects like temple development and leadership. So Maharaj helped and established and strengthened temple across United States, Ukraine, Russia, and Baltic states during the ISKCON's expansion in 1980s and 1990s. And apart from this, services in preaching, Maharaj is especially known for his deep, melodious kirtans and personal care towards devotees. Maharaj has inspired thousands of devotees worldwide through his lectures, and seminars on topics like humility, Vaishnava relationship, and power of holy name. These are the major seminars which Maharaj emphasizes on. And Maharaj has had a great role in developing the Eastern Europe. So Maharaj was one of the pioneers of Krishna consciousness in the former Soviet Union. Despite, as we know, that there were many political restrictions, still he risked his life and his safety to preach and establish Krishna consciousness and create an underground devotee community in those communist times. So about the sannyas, Maharaj accepted the sannyas order in 1986, Sridham Mayapur, and was later appointed as GVC overseeing the regions of Ukraine, Belarus, and other parts of Eastern Europe. And Maharaj has been traveling throughout these countries, even North America, Soviet Union, and India.
Are you showing, is changing the screen?
Maharaj, I will be sharing now. I was reading the details of it. So about the preaching mission and leadership, Maharaj got the GBC, became the GBC in late 1980s. And as I told that he was overseeing the regions of Ukraine, Russia, Lithuania, Latvia, and parts of the United States. Now focus on the holy name. Maharaj is renowned worldwide for his heart-melting kirtans. His chanting style is deeply meditative and draws many devotees. Like even now, if you go to Mayapur, Maharaj regularly leads kirtan in the evenings. Maharaj's whole YouTube video is like whenever you go to Maharaj's YouTube channel, it is full of kirtans which Maharaj does every day with his disciples in Shriram Mayapur. So Maharaj is renowned for his stole-steering kirtans and seminars on chanting of the holy name. Maharaj encourages deep, heartfelt connection with Krishna through japa and sankirtan. His humility and devotion in kirtan have transformed countless hearts worldwide. So, apart from this, Maharaj, I have heard a lecture of Maharaj in which he was quoting that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Prabhupada always inspire devotees to take shelter in Mahamantra with sincerity and faith, because that is the Yuga Dharma, and we shouldn't blur out the Yuga Dharma aspect and keep chanting and doing kirtan, because that is the Yuga Dharma and that will help us to go back home, back to Godhead. So, about as an author and teacher, Maharaj wrote many books like Krishna Protects His Devotees, The Nectar of Lockdown, Volume 1 and 2, Collected Letters Written to Friends, 5-volume set. His writings reflect faith, empathy, and Srila Prabhupada's compassion in practice. Apart from this, the books were The Art of Chanting Hare Krishna, Nectar of Holy Name, etc. Legacy and Mood. Over 5 decades of continuous devotional service embodies humility, steadiness, and deep absorption in the holy name. Loved and revered worldwide for his gentle leadership and heartfelt guidance. As we have heard the lecture, how Maharaj was sharing his memories with Srila Prabhupada, how deeply Maharaj shared his realization when he got to know that Srila Prabhupada had left the world, how he felt about it, and taking the responsibility of guiding various devotees which he was guiding in the temple, the new devotees, as he was telling in the lecture. So Maharaj is very humble but very deeply absorbed in the holy name as well. His life and teachings continue to inspire thousands to deepen their relationship with Krishna. So remembering Srila Prabhupada. The first time I saw Prabhupada, I was already second initiated because Prabhupada accepted me as his disciple for the first and second initiation through mail. He requested the local leaders to conduct the fire sacrifice to give me my name, and for my second initiation to give sacred thread. I started distributing Prabhupada books in 1960, but I never really became steady at that service until probably sometime in the early part of 1970. For me, that was my way of reciprocating for all the nourishment that I got in my Krishna consciousness. Through his books and through his followers, by surrendering to distributing his books. And for me, it was a very great surrender. In my heart, I always felt this constant confirmation. But he was most pleased if I distributed his books. And this reciprocation really sustained me. As we can see that how Maharaj had been traveling and teaching all of us through his kirtans, lectures, and how we should be taking holy name as our life and soul. So nowadays Maharaj mostly resides in Shriram Mayapur and gives association to all the devotees, especially in the evenings. Maharaj has kirtan sessions so that many devotees can go personally and attend that. So we have been grateful that such spiritual souls are amongst us and we can get their mercy and association and learn lot of things. Like, as we know that there is a letter that was written that we can read Srimad Bhagavatam and try to understand and manipulate it by our own individual efforts. But when we see a Vyakti Bhagavat, a person Bhagavat in front of us, we can learn from his example, the way he talks, the way he walks, the way he, everything is perfect as a Bhagavat. So we have such amazing personalities amongst us to teach us by their association. Jai His Holiness Niranjana Swami Maharaj ki Jai. Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, would you like to add something?
No, very nice. Yeah. Mas, you have covered all these things. Mas deeply attached to the holy name. When he was in Ujjain, he came Ujjain 1917 GBC meeting. He was also leading kirtan, very nice. And he was upset when devotees were not playing nicely. Midam. Okay, thank you very much. Go for